Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to Canadian Gothic, a series by the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners. This episode is going to take us to Regina, Saskatchewan. Well, more specifically, to a grad party that was held outside the city at an area near Last Mountain Lake back in 2006. On the third night of a 3-day-long celebration, a group of people unconnected to the graduation crashed the party. And at some point, after their arrival, tensions flared between members of the groups. What started as a verbal altercation in a dimly lit field has evolved into one of Regina's most often discussed unsolved murders. Despite there being nearly 200 in attendance and 17 years of finger-pointing, investigators have yet been able to prove who killed 19-year-old Misha Pavelick. And that brings us to this episode. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by Madelayne Kline to discuss her hometown case, the murder of Misha Pavelick.
Misha Pavelick's dad remembers one of the last conversations they shared 15 years ago before his son died.
I told him I love you, and he said, I love you too, Dad.
Later that night, the 19-year-old was stabbed during an altercation at an outdoor graduation party near Regina Beach. Approximately 200 people were at the party, but the person responsible for his death has never been charged.
Ms. Madelayne Kline, freshly back from Ottawa. And you're no worse for wear, or maybe you are?
No, it was fine. Unfortunately, for anyone that listened to our last episode, I did jinx myself. Flights were canceled.
I gotta say, I felt when I heard what had happened with your vacation, I felt bad because you even said, I don't even want to say anything about this trip because I don't want to jinx it. And I think I maybe a little bit encouraged you to reveal where you're going. And, you were going to Ottawa to see Foo Fighters. I kind of pushed you a bit. You told the story. Literally, I think it was the next day I got a text from you and I could almost see the tears in the text that you sent me. So tell us what happened to you.
So we were supposed to fly out Monday morning. Giving us 2 days before the concert. I've learned my lesson. Never fly out a day before a specific event. And Sunday afternoon, I get a text. And it's like, your flights have been canceled. But take a look at your rescheduling. And I was like, are you joking me? Woke up from a wonderful nap to that. So they wanted us to fly out Monday night to Calgary, which is the opposite direction of Ottawa, and stay overnight in Calgary and then fly into Ottawa the next morning. And I was like, I am not giving you a chance to screw this up even more. Because if I am even farther away from my destination tomorrow, there's no way we're going to make it. Mm-hmm. So we ended up driving the 27 hours to Ottawa. And my husband's such a good sport because this whole time he was like, we are not driving. And then he was like, okay, listen, we can drive as long as you shut up.
and I'm sure you didn't. Did he make you sit in the back?
Like a chauffeur. No.
Oh, that's a long time in a car. I don't know many people I'd be able to spend that much time in a car with.
Neither of us are dead or divorced, so It went well.
Was it worth it, though? You went there to see one of your favorite bands, the Foo Fighters, at the Ottawa Blues Fest. How was it?
It was everything I could have imagined and more. Dave Grohl is amazing.
Yeah, he is amazing. Well, let's get into the story. We're covering a case tonight from your backyard. Last time we talked, we did Catherine Campbell's murder, which took place where I am here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We're now talking about a case that seems to be one of the major cases from Regina, Saskatchewan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I vividly remember it happening, and it was 17 years ago, and it hasn't been forgotten. That's for sure.
You would have only been a kid though, 17 years ago. The murder we're going to be talking about took place May 21st of 2006. How old would you have been roughly?
13.
Okay, so
I would have just turned 13.
Okay, so you would have definitely been exposed to this because he was only a young man when it happened. So certainly it would have been discussed.
And not only that, My sister, who would have been 16 at the time, she wanted to go to this party, and my mom wouldn't let her.
Oh, wow.
I remember how mad she was, because like, obviously, and we'll get into it. It's out of town a little bit, but yeah, I remember she was supposed to go, or she wanted to go, and my mom said absolutely not.
Wow.
And then
But this is a crime that took place on May 21st of 2006, 17 years ago, but it is in the news a lot lately for some fascinating and interesting reasons that we'll have a lot to talk about. But let's not get to the updates just yet. Let's start at the beginning. So this story revolves around Misha Pavelick, a 19-year-old man from Regina, Saskatchewan. What do you know about him? Like, this is someone I'm sure would be kind of like that tragic face of your community. What's said about Misha?
by all accounts, he was just wonderful. He was social. He was pretty much everyone's friend. He was just a great guy to be around. He was 19 at the time. He was born September 20th, 1986. And he was adopted to his parents at just 6 weeks old. And he had an older sister by about 6 years. And yeah, he was close to his family, and he seemed to have a very normal upbringing and just a normal childhood, normal life.
I've seen him described by his dad and others as like kind of a joker, someone who's kind of outlandish, always on the go, always up to something. Looking at the photos of him as well that I saw, I could kind of relate to him. I think most of my friends at that age were all the jokers, like a group of class clowns together. I feel like Misha Pavelick would have been someone that we would have been cool with. He did everything I've seen. He comes across as just a great, fun guy, and only 19 years old when this happens, which is just it. When you hear a story like this, that adds, I think, an extra layer of tragedy with his youth. But in Misha's case, he was right on the cusp of going into adulthood, because this crime takes place right at graduation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's another layer of tragedy, is how young he was and where this all went down with so many young bystanders. And yeah, it's just all around not good.
So this happens at the actual murder happens at like a high school grad party. Now, I maybe you'll know more about this, but here in Nova Scotia, we usually have this thing called Safe Grad, and it's kind of sponsored by the schools, and they'll rent a place, and everyone will go there, and there's kind of adult chaperone sort of things, and the idea is probably to prevent things from happening like what happens in this story. But it seems that in Regina, at least in 2016, the graduation party was held at a campground, and that seemed to be the tradition.
I want to say this wasn't the Safe Grad, because I know they used to do that. I don't know if they do anymore. I graduated in 2011, and I don't even know if we had a Safe Grad. I didn't go to my graduation, mind you, but
You're too cool.
Yeah, I was too cool. But I think this was more of an unofficial grad party.
Yeah, based on the kind of circumstances of the night, that is how it sounds. It's held the Victoria Day long weekend, which would be a May long weekend. When we did graduation parties, ours were usually close to graduation, so it would have been like mid-June, at least the way my memory plays out. But in this case, it's late May.
That's why this leads me to believe this was kind of the unofficial one. And although there was a guest list and it was regulated, and there were chaperones and everything, it was, I think, if you didn't have to be graduating. If you knew someone, you could be their +1 or whatever it was. Just like, Misha was 19. I assume he graduated the year before.
That's a good point.
And he was there with a friend.
Yeah. So this is an outdoor party celebrating graduation during the May long weekend, which fell from February the 19th of May to Monday the 22nd of May. And it happens at a place called Kinekama Campground?
Kanukama
Campground.
Yeah.
Do you know this place?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like 2 minutes outside of Regina Beach, which is a big beach where I'm from. I actually had a friend that lived in Kanukama. So until I did like more research on this story, I was always under the impression this campground was at Regina Beach, and I didn't know Kanukama had a campground. But so there's like houses and stuff out at Kanukama, but also a place to camp. So it's about 40 minutes outside of the city.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it would be like how would you use this place? Is this where like someone would have like cottages, or you would go just to,
no.
do you drive out there to go to the beach? Okay.
Yeah. You would like the campground specifically, you would probably do like tents or trailers. And yeah, lots of people go out just for the day, go to the beach, whatever.
Yeah. So a grad party is being held at the Kamukama Beach. It is a grad party specifically for one school. So it I don't know if the school arranged it or if it was just a group of people. But as you said, this one school was having the party. It had a guest list. There was security measures. There was 121 people who were attending, which is a lot of high school kids, and 11 chaperones. So when you think of that kind of ratio, that would be equivalent to what I picture my safe grad being. Although our safe grad, I don't recall ever being like in an outdoor field, and having it at night on a campground where there's probably water, it's not well lit. It doesn't seem like safety was the number one priority with that many people.
Well, and because and I don't know for sure, but I'm wondering, the chaperones, was it just anyone that was over the age of 18?
Yeah.
That was considered a chaperone.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know. Let's talk through Misha's experiences though at this party at the campground. When does he go there? How does he end up there? What do you know about this?
I know that he went out Friday, May 19th, and he stayed the whole weekend through, just having a good time. Everything was good. He did return home once, I believe, on the Sunday to change his clothes, and he briefly talked to his dad. His dad made sure like everything's okay out there, it's safe, and he said, "Oh yeah, nothing to worry about." The two exchanged I love yous, and he was on his way.
So at this point, he would have already been there like Friday and Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So he would have stayed out, and
yeah,
it sounds like a lot of fun.
It does, and but I can also understand why your parents didn't let your sister go. Like, I'm going for 3 days with 120 people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, but he shows up at home, changes clothes, tells his dad he loves him. What happens next?
So we mentioned that there were security measures. On the Friday night, a group of uninvited people showed up, and they weren't on the list, so they were turned away. These people showed up at about 9 p.m. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, by Sunday, the security measures had loosened a little bit.
I can imagine how that would happen.
Well, right, long weekend, last night, come and go, right?
Mm-hmm. So by Sundays, everyone's a little tired. Nothing as bad has happened, so it's probably, I can understand how it would get laxed as time goes on.
Me too. Mm-hmm. So on Sunday around 10 p.m., this same group of uninvited people that showed up Friday and were denied entry show up again and are let in.
Okay.
And it only takes about an hour for things to go south. Between Misha and this group of uninvitees, tension developed around 11 p.m. It started verbal and quickly escalated to physical. At about 11:15, there was a physical altercation between Misha and one of the guys from the uninvited group. Mm-hmm. It was, other people intervened and it was broken up, but tension was still running high. And 10 minutes later, not only did another fight break out, but multiple fights broke out between multiple people. Mm-hmm. So there was a bunch of scuffles going on out at a dark campground with a bunch of people. It wasn't very well lit. The only light they had was from a big bonfire in the middle of the grounds.
It sounds like hell.
Well, right. And the fights only lasted about 5 minutes, but in these 5 minutes, Misha and a friend of his were both stabbed. Mm-hmm. So things went south, like I said, really fast. And in the darkness and, with at this point on this Sunday, it said that there were about 200 people there.
Okay.
Who knows what happened? And even I covered this on my YouTube channel. When you have that many drunk teens in one dimly lit place, you're going to have 200 different perceptions on what happened. So, yeah, unfortunately, Misha and his friend were stabbed in these fights.
And at least initially, Misha was alive. His friend, but both him and his friend were badly injured. Like it seemed very, like this wasn't like a minor stab wound. Like they were seriously injured.
Yeah. By 11:38, 8 911 calls had been placed to the Lumsden RCMP, which was the closest detachment. And yeah, all the reports said like there are 2 guys here out of Kanukama that have like serious injuries. They were stabbed.
Wow.
One of the saddest aspects of all of this going on is one of Misha's really good friends. In the midst of this going on, she called Misha's dad and said, like, Misha's been stabbed. Things are crazy. This is not looking good. And Misha's dad told her to put the phone up to his ear so he could tell him he loved him. Which is like one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, that, and I'm sure what he was hearing in the background was just chaos as well, because
absolutely.
And the 2 people were stabbed during this. It was Misha, and then someone I've seen described as a good friend or a close friend named Derek Enns. Is the last name. Do you know what their relationship was, Misha and Derek? Like, do you know how they're connected?
I don't. I just know that they were quite close.
They were described. Yeah. Okay. I've seen everything.
Yeah.
I've seen. They're described as friends, and it seems like they were kind of on the same side of whatever this scuffle is with the group that we've just been calling the uninvited, which just sounds very grim. Anyway, the uninvited arrive. 8 calls or so are made to RCMP. When they arrive to the scene, they arrive to chaos. Again, as you said, it's dark. There's a bunch of kids every which way. Half the people have took off in their vehicles and got out of there when the trouble started. So putting the pieces together of what happened from the beginning would have been like such a daunting task to try to everyone just chill. We got to talk to everyone and figure out what happened. It'd be impossible.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And when RCMP and paramedics arrived, people were performing CPR on Misha and Derek. Unfortunately, Misha was pronounced dead at the scene. Derek was rushed to the Regina General for emergency surgery, and thankfully survived his injuries. But
it was
not
close.
Without a fight.
I've read some of the news articles about Derek's stabbing and everything that's happened after for him, and he was close to death. Like he was fortunate to have survived. Like it was close.
Absolutely. It was nearly a double homicide.
Yeah. When a significant crime like a homicide, almost double homicide, happens in a party with 170 peers in a place like Regina, the investigation that followed must have just been huge in scope, because they would want to talk to everyone that was there, talk to the chaperones, follow the leads. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be associated with either the police or with Misha and his group of friends at this point in time, because they would have been, everybody would have been speaking to police. I can only imagine.
Absolutely. I could only imagine what the visual web looked like on the board.
Yeah, you got the thing on your wall with 170 people.
Yeah, and they did have 170 interviews, and they did what they could at the scene for forensics, and it was mostly hearsay, but Regina's small. And there was always a couple names being thrown around. Even, I was 13 when this happened, but even when I entered high school, people were still talking about it. I got a name.
Really?
And it was just...
Because people would have known some members of this uninvited group, if not known all of them, known about
Totally.
all of them. But when the scuffle's happening and somebody quickly stabs another person in the dark, it's hard to see. Like, I've even seen situations where there's like video footage and you can't really tell who's stabbing or when the stabbing is happening. So I can only imagine the police probably had a good list of the people that weren't invited to the party that were there and involved in the fight. But how do you take that next step and prove like this is the guy that stabbed? And
Exactly.
yeah, and did the same guy stab both Misha and Derek, or is it two separate people?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Like, how many different renditions did they get from all these interviews, and how do they narrow it down?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not an investigator, so
No. And then also you add in that this is the third day of a party where people have been drinking and being tired, being up late, and so many people coming and going. It'd just be this blurry mess. Like it was recently I watched this documentary about Woodstock, like the concert they did in like maybe in 2000 or something. One of the later, like the last
99.
Yeah, like the last Woodstock. But what ended up happening was like as the time went on and everyone was getting tired, weren't eating or they weren't drinking, they were just drinking alcohol. By the end of it, it just turned into complete chaos. I almost think like this could have been something similar to that. After 3 days of being out there, when you start interviewing people, it'd be really hard to get a straight story. One thing I read about, I don't know if you got into this, but I went down the rabbit hole a little bit reading about Derek Enz's case, and he is Misha's friend who was stabbed at the same time during the same brawl, but managed to survive. And they actually caught the person who stabbed him, prosecuted him, sent him to prison, but they weren't able to connect him with Misha's stabbing. I'm just going to read you a short article that relates to Derek Enz's case, who again was Misha's friend who was stabbed. And this is when the fellow who stabbed him was actually sentenced. I'm just going to read it to you. So it says, a 21-year-old Regina man who stabbed a teenager at a party near Regina Beach, the same party where another young man was killed, is off to jail after receiving a 3-year sentence. Please forgive me. I'm really sorry for what I did, Scott Robert Nelson said in court Wednesday, directing his apology to the victim, Derek Enz. Nelson pled guilty to aggravated assault and other offenses last month. The court heard that he stabbed Enz, 18, several times in the stomach during a brawl at a party near Regina Beach on Last Mountain Lake on May 20th, 2006. Enz was hospitalized. Another man, 19-year-old Misha Pavelick, was stabbed to death at the party. It wasn't explained in court how or if the two stabbings were connected. No one has been charged in Pavelick's death. Although Nelson's lawyer argued for a community sentence, the Crown said the severity of the offense warranted time behind bars. Provincial Court Judge Carol Snell agreed, pointing out that Enz almost died from his injuries. So I think Misha dies. They're not able to figure out what happened to him yet. Derek Enz, they get the guy who did it to him, a 21-year-old, ends up in prison.
What's the date on that article?
I don't have it in front of me.
You don't have, okay.
No, but it wasn't long after.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, if this is like years after, I wonder if this Scott Nelson was just 18.
No, I don't have the date of the article, but I believe it was like within a year or two of the actual event. So it seemed like they got this guy pretty quick.
Well, Derek survived, so he could tell him it was Scott Nelson.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would like to know how if that's what happened or how they figured it out, but they got him. They can't identify.
Nice 3 years.
Yeah, seriously. We'll get into that as we go, but they're not able to figure out who killed Misha. Obviously, the more serious of the two cases. As time goes on, they're not able to find a suspect, or at least not publicly name a suspect in Misha's murder. It has become one of Regina's most often discussed cold to semi-cold cases. You're into crime, you're from Regina. Over the years, how is this story portrayed, and how is like the homicide of Misha Pavelick discussed?
Well, I always only heard one name, and it was always the same name that got brought up.
Really? But if people are giving a name, do people also talk about why he isn't being arrested?
Well, you can't arrest someone off hearsay.
Okay.
Even if all of those interviews line up, I think you need some sort of evidence. There's no doubt in my mind that this guy was at one point interviewed or questioned or whatever. But without, solid evidence, it's hard. It's very hard.
Well, yeah, and even if everyone is saying the same name, the investigators and the prosecutor don't want to pull him in court and charge him if it's just based on people pointing the finger. They need more evidence so they know they get the conviction and make it worth everyone's time. So they may very well have a pretty good idea of what happened, and they're just waiting years and years and years for that one piece that, the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of gaining a conviction in a case like this. But that just must be hell for this guy's parents, especially if you're hearing, everybody giving this name of like, I know who did it. It was, so and so. Meanwhile, you're seeing all Misha's friends grow up, have kids, get married. Like it's so brutal. I really feel for his dad, because I saw several interviews with his father. Lorne is his name, and he just comes across as like the nicest, sweetest old man. And
That's what I thought too.
Yeah, everything I saw with him, I'm like, oh my God, like this heartbroken father. I felt like horrible for him.
Yeah.
You can project further. You mentioned at the beginning, Misha was adopted, and I don't know what it is. I think it's maybe I'm projecting because I have friends who adopt it because they weren't able to have their own baby. They adopt it, and I kind of followed along a bit with their journey of trying to have a child, how in love they are with each other, and how much they want it to like raise a kid. Then finally, they go through all this trouble, years and years of applications and waiting. They finally are able to adopt a child, and now their kid's a couple years old, but they're like the best parents ever. And I don't know what it is, but I often think like, you can do something, have a crazy time, and end up having a kid and become a great dad or mom and raise the kid. But I think like you don't like do this thing and adopt. It's like you need to be committed. And I have this thing for people who adopt. I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to say like they're always awesome, but I think often like it's just that story of someone adopting. I don't know. It does it to me because I have friends that went through it.
Well, and I have an aunt who couldn't have children, and they tried for years to adopt, and it always fell through. It's not that easy. It's not cheap.
No, absolutely not. And then also like, I don't know what they went through, but some people will also try all the different like fertility stuff, which is very expensive, often involves travel. It's yeah, it's something. But anyway, all of this to say, when I saw interviews with Misha's dad, he just struck me as this like genuinely nice guy who and another thing is when you're reading and researching like a case, like a murder that happened in 2006, you can read the reports from when it happened and see his dad as a young man talking about it. But then as you go through, the 5-year anniversary, the 10-year anniversary, you see his father age, but still be like this heartbroken man. And it's, I don't know, I had a moment watching him this morning as I was going through all these articles. But 17 years pass. There's different names being thrown around or the same name being thrown around. Before we get to the update, let's talk a little bit. Actually, I want to back up and talk a little bit about the uninvited that showed up to the party. So it's a quick change of gears. But Friday night, this group tries to get in. They're not able to get in. 2 nights later, they come back, having already been turned away. I can't help but think they were maybe coming back, I don't know what to say, to start trouble, but I just feel like the second time they came maybe would be a little meaner.
It is alleged to me these people were there with a purpose, and it was to hurt Misha specifically.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Well, so they sound like they were on a mission.
Okay. Though they at least had 2 knives, and that's not normal.
I don't travel with weapons.
No. So. Your attitude can be a weapon, though, so don't screw with Madelayne. But that kind of makes sense because everything I read, it seems like it's written as with Misha being at like the front of whatever this dispute is that kind of starts and stops and starts and stops. I would love to know what the investigators know.
Me too. I'd
'Cause
like
they-
to know how big the group of uninvited were. I want to know how many there were, and maybe like how old they ranged, because clearly a couple were a little older in their 20s or whatever it was.
Mhm.
So,
That's a good point.
and I want to know, I mean, and it's neither here nor there, but what was it over? What was the issue?
Mhm. When you learn the issue between like a murder, the issue behind a murder, it's often like it just upsets you. I think it's better sometimes it's not to know. You know, someone owes someone $40. You know, these sorts of things, or looked at
Or if
someone's.
it's worse if it's over a girl or over a boy or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about this as an unsolved case. The reason we decided to cover the story tonight, and the reason you did a video on your YouTube channel a week or two ago, is because this case has had a major, significant update. I'm going to play a news article that summarizes the update, and then we can talk about it. So here it comes.
The Pavelick family had been counting the days until someone was arrested for the murder of Misha Pavelick.
6,246. Sounds like a large number, right? Well, 6,246 is the days between Misha's death and today.
19-year-old Misha was stabbed at a Regina Beach grad party on the May 2006 long weekend. Police never gave up in their search for a suspect. Last weekend, police arrested a man who was 17 at the time of the incident.
On Saturday, June 24th, 2023, a 34-year-old adult male was charged with one count of second-degree murder, contrary to Section 235, Sub 1 of the Criminal Code. He was arrested in Regina by investigators from the Saskatchewan RCMP Historical Case Unit without incident.
The man's name cannot be released because the suspect was a youth back in 2006. Police credit the passage of time for prompting people to come forward with leads. The suspect was released from custody following an initial court appearance and will be back before a judge next month. RCMP hope the arrest will lead others to come forward with further information.
What's the mood on the ground with this announcement being made for an arrest in a case that shocked the community and has clung to the community for the last 17 years?
So when the news was first released, it was a sentence to sentence basis. It was like someone was arrested for the murder of Misha, and we were like, this is it. And then they were like, but he can't be named. And we were like, you're kidding me.
That's so
my
takes the
God.
wind out of it, eh?
Seriously, because
And-
I came home that Tuesday and I hadn't read anything yet because it was released at about 3:30. I hadn't read anything. And my husband said, hey, they arrested someone for the murder of Misha. And I looked at him and I said, was it? And then I said a name and he goes, I don't know. They won't release a name. And I'm just like, no way.
It's so deflating.
Yeah.
But they say, and the reason they're not releasing a name is because the person who they've arrested and charged with the murder was 17 at the time. So they were a minor, so they will protect them. They're also like, what shocked me is they're not even in jail. Like they're like released, like awaiting whatever.
They weren't held in custody.
Yeah,
And
it seems shocking,
I mean,
right?
I get that they're being tried or they're being charged as a youth, but then at the end of the article, it was like the man is set to appear before Regina Provincial Youth Court on July 17th. What are they going to do? Send him to juvenile hall? A 34-year-old man?
I don't know
Like,
how that should work, but there's something about. Here's my thought. So you commit a crime when you're 17 or 12 or whatever the case may be, and you get away with it until the point that you're an adult. You're then arrested as an adult, but you committed the crime as a kid, so they, handle you as if you're still a kid or something. But here's my thing is like, whoever did this, let's say if this 17-year-old, it hasn't been proven yet, but he's 34 now. If he did it when he was 17, he knew he did it when he was 19, 20, 21.
Right.
Like it should be, you turn 19 and you turn yourself in. And if not, we're charging you as an adult. If you should.
Exactly.
That's how
and
it
even
should work.
like 17, that's close enough to 18 for me. I think the Youth Justice Act, especially for violent crime, is a joke. It should not exist for murder or violent crime.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if you steal something from the 7-Eleven, charge them as a youth. I don't care. Don't release their name. But if you murder someone, especially at 17, I don't know.
Well,
you committed an adult crime.
Well, here in
you
Canada,
should be treated like an adult.
Yeah,
True.
But here in Canada, you kill someone when you're 30, you could still you may spend 10 years in prison and then get
That's
out.
true.
It's not like if you charge them as an adult when they're 16 or 17, it's not like it ruins their entire life. It protects people. But I think my point, what kills me with this is if this guy did it, I'm talking as if he did, when he was 20 to 22, 23, up to 34, it's like he knew the whole time. If he knew and didn't do anything or turn himself in or do the right thing, I feel like that equates to committing the crime as an adult for me, in my mind.
Absolutely.
But they're charging him in youth court and they're kind of handling him that way. If he is convicted, what even is the sentence? Like, what do they even do to a 17-year-old who kills someone?
Well, exactly. Like, the most they're probably looking at is maybe, if we're lucky, 10 years. But where? They're not going to, if he's charged as a youth, they're not going to send him to the Prince Albert Penitentiary.
Mm-hmm.
Or they're probably not even Regina Corrections.
And also, if they charge him as a youth, I believe that would also make it so that they don't publicly release this stuff. Like, I don't know if his name would ever be released. But then again, since he's an adult now, if he has any money or anything, Misha's family could probably sue him civilly, and that would get the story out there. But I just like when you hear this go on for this long, they finally get the guy. He was 17 at the time that he did it, if this is the guy. And I think if they made an arrest at this point, they're probably pretty confident or got what they need. It just seems so underwhelming at the end of all this.
Absolutely. Well, and he appeared in court yesterday. Ugh. And I was hoping that maybe this would have been the day they were like, 'cause I wasn't looking, or I wasn't expecting for closure yesterday, but I was hoping maybe they'd say, yeah, we're trying it as an adult. This is crazy.
So if you want to know how serious they're taking this case, I'm going to play you a news clip that covers yesterday's hearing. So we're recording this on the 18th of July. The clip we just listened to earlier about the arrest, it said he's going to be in court, later in the month or whatever. That was yesterday that he was actually in court. And here's a news clip that summarizes yesterday's very deflating and underwhelming court appearance. Listen to this.
Good afternoon. Today, the man accused in the 2006 death of Misha Pavelick made his second court appearance.
The 34-year-old accused told the judge that he has been working and hasn't had time to see a lawyer. The matter was adjourned until August the 21st. The suspect was 17 years old at the time of the murder and cannot be named. He will appear in court next on August the 21st.
He hasn't been able to talk to a lawyer because he's been working. I hate to laugh. It's like absurd, right?
This had to have been the fastest court date ever. Like, what were they in there for? 7 minutes?
Well, you would think if you're charged with murder, you could maybe take time off work to get a lawyer right away. Like, I feel like that'd be my first call. But then again, if you're being charged as a juvenile, I'd be like, I'm too busy for that.
Crazy. Yeah, and he's not like he's being held in custody.
He's at work. He's been working.
And you're like, yeah, we all have stuff to do. You should prioritize. Like, yeah. I'm surprised that they should give them like 14 days to find a lawyer. And if they don't do so, they're appointed one. Let's get this show on the road here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Misha's family waited, 6,000 plus days. And now you're just further delaying it. It's just, it's all so cruel. And it just sucks to see people drag through this whole system. But
Yeah.
they're going to be back in court in August. Hopefully by then he's able to have the time to meet with a lawyer and we can get this thing going. Because I think if he did it, he needs to pay for what he did. And Misha's family, friends and family, they deserve the facts to be released, and they're only going to be released through a hearing, through a trial.
Well, I'd love to know what was brought forward that made them be able to arrest someone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, was it just another tip? Because there's no way that the person that was arrested wasn't on their radar before.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting.
What came about?
Yeah, it'll be really interesting if the person who, well, actually either way, but if the person that the name and the name that's commonly shared, if that's the person that's arrested, what changed now? Like, what did they get that they can do something about it now instead of any time over the last 17 years? And if it's someone altogether different, then,
that would be mind blowing.
That would be and it very well could be, because it's like if there's a fight in a dark area and there's not even a fight, if there's multiple fights, who's to say there wasn't someone on the sidelines that was there and that just pulled a knife out and did that to Misha while he was in a fight with someone else? Who knows what happened? And that's why I think it'd be hard to prove at this point, especially if you have a group of people who are either covering for each other or pointing the finger at each other. It's really hard to narrow it down to what happened.
Well, see, and that's like one of my first thoughts was, wouldn't it be crazy if like a 10-year-old video surfaced of this guy bragging about it, or like incriminating himself somehow? You mean you never know? 10 years ago was 2013. So
well, that's a good point. And
yeah,
we've talked about cases that involve like Mr. Big stings. I don't know if they would, it could be something like that. It could be somebody who recorded this person confessing. I don't know what. I think it would take more than just people saying, I know he did it or I saw him do it. I think it would take more than that after all this time. One thing, I don't know if this played into it or if this is just like what I call propaganda, but the police did a podcast. The Saskatchewan RCMP made a podcast series that they're very proud of. And I know that because they talk about it all throughout the press conference announcing the arrest.
Anytime they can mention it, they do. It
seems, yeah. But the RCMP in Saskatchewan decided they wanted to take Misha's case and make it the subject of a short podcast series where like investigators of the case and Misha's dad talk a bit about it. And they claim that after that podcast was released, they had several tips to them as well as to Crime Stoppers. So I think when I hear that, I wonder, like, is that really what happened? Maybe they kicked the hornet's nest and it got people talking and someone came forward, or is it just propaganda? Like, I guess I'm kind of a bit suspect of a podcast that's produced by the RCMP.
Yeah.
I know how they feel about themselves.
Either way, podcast or not, the teens that were there in 2006 are adults now. Many of them parents. Mm-hmm. Some of them might have already been parents at the time. So that means they have grown-ass adult children. Mm-hmm. And a lot can change in 17 years, like personally.
Yeah.
So you never know. Someone could have grown up and thought, like, my kid's 19 now. And how would that feel if this was my kid, and maybe came forward with information or what? But you never know.
No,
well,
you're right.
After this podcast was released, I guess they searched some area of the water in Regina Beach. I'm not sure what they were looking for.
Well, maybe they had a tip that someone threw a knife in said water, and
well, maybe. But yeah, I thought that
they weren't fishing.
That's crazy. True. Yeah. Well, it's the RCMP. You never know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think what's next in this case, in August, there's going to be a hearing where they will decide if the charges, if he will face charges as an adult or a minor. If it as an adult, we'll have a lot more access to what changed in this case. If a minor, there will be publication bans. We won't know anything, even after there's a conviction, if there is one, if he's being tried as a minor, which is, well, I guess the important thing is Misha's family finds out and they would be able to attend. I guess just be the public and the news reporting, and word will get out. If it's a big story in your community, people are gonna get around.
Well, even like, so every couple years, Misha's case would come up in the news, just usually around the anniversary or wherever. And there's been a couple times where in the age of social media, I think it was 2 years ago, they did an article about him. And one of the comments on it was, they tagged the person, was like, "We know you did it."
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And so I was just like, oh my God, insane. Yeah. People don't care online, and they will say anything.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, they got to be careful with that.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh my God.
Well, because you never know. There's so many cases. I've come across so many stories where, like, the armchair detective, online activist, just goes incredibly wrong.
Yes.
Anyway, just because everyone is saying we think it's this guy doesn't necessarily mean it is. And
no, exactly.
yeah.
And that's the reason you can't arrest someone off hearsay.
No. So we'll follow this with an update whenever the time comes. Hopefully the story comes out. Hopefully they got the right person, and hopefully they have the evidence they need to convict them. And hopefully that gives Misha's loved ones, friends and family, a little help towards, closure, if you want to use that word, or at least knowing that justice has been served, for the death of the murder of their 19-year-old loved one.
Yeah, I'm like, and this case is not only a historic case, but it's such an important and big case locally. I just feel like our justice system cannot fumble this one by not trying him as an adult.
Like, I'm sure the local police investigating this realize the severity and the importance and the gravity of it. Hopefully that's why it took so long, is they wanted to make sure this was a slam dunk, and hopefully that's what we get.
Totally.
With that behind us, let's start wrapping this up. Anything you want to say before we do? Anything you've been watching that you want to recommend listeners watch?
No, I've just been watching the usual. I got home from Ottawa on Friday, and I was going to be productive on the weekend, and that just didn't happen.
All right. Well, Madelayne, these stories are dark. They're interesting and fascinating, though, and they often say a lot about the world we live in and the relationships we all have with each other. And I'm glad to be able to talk about them and break them down with you. So thanks for joining me for another week.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to what people have to say about this one. Mm-hmm. Just with the Youth Justice Act and everything else, I think we're going to get some pretty broad feedback.
Yeah. And even with a conviction, if he's charged as a youth and is convicted, is that justice at this point for a 34-year-old man? That'll be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this all plays out.
I want to thank you for joining Madelayne and I for this episode of Nighttime. Now I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before I do, let me give some thanks. First, a big thanks to Monty, Datta, who contributes the music for this episode, and to LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides the intro and outro voiceovers. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. Now, on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Krista, Leslie, and Grumpy Chat, thank you for going premium. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help out in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription only costs a couple of dollars a month, gives you the episodes 2 days early, gives them to you ad-free, and gives you access to a full back catalog of episodes. You can go premium now at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And for anyone else, you can help out the show by simply sharing these episodes on social media and letting like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If you have any story ideas, if you want to give feedback on the show, or contribute a voice memo to be aired and responded to in an upcoming episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. Madelayne and I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. We hope to hear from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.
I now invite Mr. Pavelick to provide a statement. Sir?
Well, I'm here on behalf of my son, Misha William Pavelick. And I'm representing his mother, Susan, and sister Kathleen. And my wife, Karen, is here. So, 6,246 sounds like a large number, right? Well, 6,246 is the days between Misha's death and today. On behalf of the family, I want to express our sincere and grateful thanks to the RCMP Major Crimes and Historical Case Unit. Always respectful, always hopeful. They never stopped communicating with us, sharing what they could. So many of them offering their commitment, courage, and humility, and sometimes frustration, but only rarely. The units and other members in the RCMP exemplify a basic core social value. Together we can. Together we can. Prioritizing the greater good and the concept of common welfare and safety. We, the family, we realize this is not the end, just the beginning of the end. And it renews our hope for justice for our dear Misha.